Welcome everyone to the Adventurers Club Talks. Tonight we have an interesting talk about a recreation of a journey down through Baja, Mexico. We have with us tonight Todd Bruce.
Welcome.
And his journey, we're going to talk about how the whole thing was done and what kind of experience they had. And the end result of it was a documentary, The Devil's Road. And we're going to talk about how we got there and all the experiences along the way. And as you can see, he got back alive. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
So your interest in Baja goes back a long ways.
Yeah, a long ways. I come from a kind of an adventurous family, an outdoors family. I grew up backpacking and fishing and skiing, started at about the age of 4. So the outdoors has always been a big part of me and who I am. And I pass that along to my kids. You know, my kids were 1, my daughter was 1, my son was 4, and I'd been doing a lot of reading about Baja, California, the fishing, the diving, the beaches, the just wide open spaces, and it really drew me in. So we took off in 1990 and drove the entire length, camped the entire way, and I was captured, caught in the net, so they say. So ever since then, it was that was our vacation destination for years and years, and sometimes we'd go back 2 or 3 times a year. So that's kind of what got me involved with Baja.
Okay. And so this project obviously takes it to another level. What was your inspiration? How did you arrive at deciding you needed to do this?
So I would say about 6 or 8 years ago, we actually figured out and found out who my great-grand-uncle actually was. I mean, you know, my mom grew up going to the Nelson and Goldman ranch. My grandmother was born and raised on this ranch in the San Joaquin Valley. So we always heard stories about ranch life, and you know, my mom's Uncle Ed, you know, she always would tell stories, and it was always such a nice guy. But we really never knew what he did until we found out that he was actually one of the best and foremost naturalists to ever study the place. So he and his partner, Edward William Nelson, were sent to Baja, California in 1905, and they did the first comprehensive study of the flora and fauna of Baja, California. The picture you're looking at right now, this is Edward William Nelson, and he was the guy that was put in charge. He kind of made a name for himself. In 1871, he was sent to Alaska to study. Well, actually, he was sent there to take weather observations. And in his spare time, he collected birds and animals and did a bunch of exploration up in there. So he spent 4 years there, came back with over 10,000 artifacts.
Wow.
From the indigenous people up there, plus plants and animals.
That's quite the project.
It was huge. It was huge. And he figured out how he could kind of barter his way through all of these indigenous villages.
Yeah.
And so he noticed that a lot of the natives would just throw something away. Well, he'd go, hey, you know, I'll give you this for that. And, well, yeah, but it's not worth anything. Mm-hmm. So he was given the nickname, the man who buys good-for-nothing things. So he made his name there, made his way through a Death Valley expedition in 1891.
So he's been in the extremes.
Way the extremes, and then spent 14 years in Baja, or in all of Mexico, the last year of which was in Baja.
Okay.
So that's where we came in. And back in 2015, my oldest brother and his son and me and my son did a 2-week trip down to Baja to camp and fish and swim and dive. And so I was explaining to them along the way that you know, all the stuff that Nelson and Goldman had done while in Baja, California, and they were just blown away. And my son, being a filmmaker, and he kind of said, well, you know, we can do a film about it. And then my brother piped up and said something about, well, let's do it on motorcycles.
Because that's a good choice, right?
Why not? Why not? Exactly. So, you know, Nelson and Goldman, they did over 2,000 miles in a year, all on horseback, going from the top to the bottom. They did it on the old El Camino Real, because there weren't any roads back then.
Yeah.
So we figured that we might be able to, you know, make a 21st century upgrade from horses to motorcycles, and try to follow their way through the peninsula, and we wanted to try to get on the exact same spots as much as we could. So
That's not a very hospitable place to travel through.
it's not. It's not. You know, we endured probably not as extreme of environmental conditions that they did, but for us it was pretty extreme. I mean, we were in Baja, California. We were camping at 10,000 foot elevation at the highest peak in the snow.
Wow.
We were waking up in the middle of the desert with, you know, below freezing temperatures, frost everywhere. We endured the 100+ temperature, you know, massive winds, you know, you name it, we hit it.
So you had a couple of layers of clothing in your
We did that.
saddlebags.
Yeah, yeah. Packing for a trip like that for 2 months in Baja is a tricky thing.
I'll bet. So this is somewhat of a planning issue. There's a lot goes into setting up to be able to do that.
It's a planning nightmare. Yeah, not really an issue. It's a nightmare. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the process. How did you approach it?
Okay.
And
all right.
How did you dig up all the resources that you needed to do it?
Yeah. Well, first so my son JT, he was the director. He's the filmmaker. He has a degree in film, and he kind of put the bug in our ear that it can be done. You know, I'm a retired fireman, so I had 32 years of logistics and planning and administrative, you know, stuff. So I figured, some of that I could probably do that. And then we enlisted my daughter, and she's you know, marketing wizard and editor and writer. So she said she can put some of that into play too. And then we kind of thought, well, shoot, we need somebody that's scientific, you know, that can keep us on the right path. And so we enlisted a good friend of ours, Greg Meyer, who's a professor and Baja enthusiast. He's been teaching classes down in Baja for years and years, and just the exact right man for the job. So once we kind of got our heads together, we started thinking, okay, well, how are we going to do this? We don't have any money.
Yeah.
We don't have
Small
motorcycles. You know, we don't ride motorcycles much, and so it was just kind of a snowball effect here at that point. We put together an initial 2-week expedition into Baja. We bought some film equipment, you know, some new sound equipment. We kind of mapped out what we wanted to do, and we towed our 22-foot Zodiac down. Part of what Nelson and Goldman did was they were able to go out to about 8 of the islands along the Baja Peninsula, some on the Pacific side and a couple on the Gulf side. So we wanted to go out and film on those islands first.
Sure.
We had new cameras. We had, you know, just kind of feeling things out, seeing what we can do. Plus, there was a lot of spots on the peninsula that we'd never been to, that we wanted to make sure that we could get to or knew how to get to them. There were people down there that we knew that we wanted to interview. So the preliminary expedition was done a year prior to our main expedition. And that went very well, went really well, with a couple of exceptions. You can't go down to Baja and think that it's just going to be a totally smooth trip.
Well, I expect we're going to hear about some of those things in a bit.
Yeah, we most definitely will.
So you said you started out with no money. So how did you do that bit?
So did I mention we did this film on a micro budget? Yeah, it was a micro budget. Yeah, I put in some seed money. We all put in a little bit of money from our own bank account, but mostly it was we set up a crowdfunding campaign through Indiegogo, and so we were able to raise about $11,000, which gave us the opportunity to buy the 2 motorcycles. We initially thought we could do this with 3 motorcycles, 3 riders, and a chase truck, because we were thinking that the chase truck could carry all of our gear, all of our food and extra supplies and everything, and the motorcycles go really light. Yeah. We just had no money for that at all. So we got our heads together and we said, well, we can afford 2 bikes. We paired all of our camera equipment, sound equipment into 7 cameras and the sound equipment, and left a lot of stuff behind, and we went guerrilla style. It was just me and JT, my son, and on 2 bikes, fully self-supported. So, yeah, it was a stretch to do all of that, get all the equipment, and still have the funds for gas and a hotel every once in a while. We camped most of the way.
Now, I saw some photos of you outfitting the bikes or having them done.
Yes, yeah. So we enlisted some experts for us. I gathered up a bunch of firemen, friends of mine that are all adventure riders, and so we met and kind of said, well, how are we going to do this? What's the best bike to use? What's kind of best equipment? All of that, and so they kind of steered us towards the Gen 1 Kawasaki KLR 650. Okay. So we went down on 16 and 18-year-old motorcycles. We bought off of Craigslist.
That's gutsy.
It was, but we had a really good mechanic, and his name was Bob Davis in Santa Cruz, and so he took both of our bikes, went through them meticulously, and then he also gave us about a half a day seminar on how to do some of the basic repairs, which was extremely helpful. We learned how to change the chains and sprockets and tires and a lot of the minor stuff that we might run across. Yeah. So that was good to have in our back pocket.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine some of that happened along the way.
Yes. Yeah. So that was how we got the motorcycles. We started outfitting them, with panniers and handlebar risers, because JT's 6'6" and I'm 6'4". Mm-hmm. We needed to set the bikes up ready for this kind of work.
Sure. Okay.
So.
Now, in reading some of the history, there seemed to be a big focus on kind of ecological and conservation issues along the way. How did that all mesh in? Why was that a focus for you?
So we started looking back at all the years that we were going down to Baja, and we had 30 years of experience down there, and so we started noticing that there's been this gradual shift and change in everything from the fish stocks, fish habitat are just dropping out from underneath us. The garbage is piling up, and the cities are getting bigger and bigger, and the roads are getting worse and worse. And there was just this major shift that was slowly happening. And in just looking at the peninsula itself, the the lack of water, the flora and fauna of the peninsula that is so unique, getting pushed out because of all the overgrowth of cities, et cetera. And coupled that with the work that Nelson and Goldman did, and we noticed that, you know, they had so much of their documents and photographs at the Smithsonian Institution. So that was one, because they both worked for the U.S. Biological Survey. And so all of their specimens, photographs, are archived in the Smithsonian. So JT and I took a week and we flew back to the Smithsonian and we went through their archives meticulously. So we got to looking at, and here's one of their glass plate negatives. This is taken in San Jose del Cabo. You can see the ship offshore there. They would take goods from the beach via these little tender boats out to the ship and back. When they got down to San Jose del Cabo, they needed to ship their specimens off. So that was how they would do it there. So so we went through hundreds and hundreds of photographs, glass plate negatives, thousands of documents that they had written. Unfortunately, their field logbooks are missing, and the Smithsonian has no idea where they are.
Oh, it's a shame.
It was. So we didn't have their daily log information, but there were enough resources that we could kind of piece together their route, what they saw, what they had to go through. So it took a lot of work to kind of put all that together to find the exact route that they took. And then, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a question about the ship
Yeah.
offshore.
Yeah.
So that ship wasn't just hanging out there waiting for them to show up.
No. Typically what happens is they show up on the beach and they wait for the ship.
Okay. So was the ship was prearranged to meet them and maybe bring supplies? How did that?
That I don't believe was just for them.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was, at that time on the peninsula, there were a few regular steamer ship stops that they did. San Jose del Cabo was one, La Paz was another, San Quintin, which is halfway down on the Pacific side, and then Ensenada. And then in between those, there were what they called landings. And it was just an open beach where a supply ship would come in. It was typically set up for the mining community back then. So the ship would come in, and then they'd tender off a bunch of stuff, and vice versa, load whatever. So
the contents of those boxes, some are probably in the Smithsonian?
Actually, I believe from the notes that I read when we captured those the contents of those boxes is actually a processed sugar.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But those are their horses, so and their mules. So they arrived, and I don't know how long they had to wait for the ship to come in, but it's incredible.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how was the trip generally on motorcycles? Did you find it to be what you expected? Or did things change up along the way?
Yes, and yes. Yes and no. I mean, it was all of that, yeah. So we did. One thing we learned was you just cannot plan to film a documentary. I mean, you can get a general plan, but things happen along the way. And that happened to us a lot, where we were planning to do this and we couldn't because the lighting wasn't good, or we couldn't find the person we were supposed to interview, or in one case we were an hour late to get to the interview because of time change we weren't paying attention to. Yeah. And so there were things that you got to learn to work on your feet. You got to learn to be adaptive, and JT and I figured out that very delicate dance probably within the first couple of days. So we left. We got on the motorcycles in the U.S. So we trailered our bikes down to the border. A friend of ours and his 5-year-old daughter brought us down, and then we loaded the motorcycles the day before, and that was the first time that we'd actually ridden the motorcycles fully loaded. The day before we went across the border.
Wow. Okay, so
did I tell you that we were complete novices at motorcycle riding?
Into the fire right away.
Yeah. Yeah. So we honestly we never driven anything larger than a motorcycle, any larger than 250 cc's, and these are 650. Big, heavy bikes. Yeah, with all of our gear and everything, 550 pounds about. So they were heavily laden, and we had a crash course in how to navigate through a lot of the obstacles. Almost every plant in Baja, California has thorns. You got to be careful of that.
Yes. Stay away, don't fall over.
Exactly. The sand will swallow you up. It was just, I can't begin to tell you how many issues we had with sand. Before we left, our motorcycle consultant said, you hit sand, just give it some gas. Well, every time I did that, poof, I was in the dirt. It didn't seem to work, so we ended up having to slow down. And even going 1 or 2 miles an hour, I was constantly getting pitched off into the side of the dirt.
Yeah, that's some pretty soft sand there.
Soft sand, the rocks are hard, the vegetation is thorny when you land in it. Yeah, there's a lot of dangers down there for us. So we ended up crossing the border, and JT had the main camera in a box on the back of his bike that was always locked. I had a monopod, and I had another handheld camera. So he would see something, he'd tell me, he would just pull over. So I always had to ask him, which lens do you need? Do you want the monopod? Do you want this camera, that camera? What do you need? So it took us a while to kind of figure out how I could support him.
Yeah.
And that's really what it was I was his gopher, and
just work some synergy somehow.
Exactly. So it worked very well. We spent 2 months on the motorcycles, constant, 24/7 with each other, and it worked very well.
Now, you were at times on roads, at times things I wouldn't call roads. How did you fare with that? How did you do your navigation? Keep track of where you were?
Yeah. Okay. So we were trying to follow Nelson and Goldman's route, and of course they did it on the El Camino Real, and now most of the El Camino Real is gone. It's either been paved over, it's been swallowed up by the desert, hasn't been used for hundreds of years now. So we had a really hard time trying to find the actual El Camino Real. We talked to a gentleman that we had met, David Keir, who's he's a mission and El Camino Real expert. So he's written several books about it. So he was able to give us some information. I looked a lot on Google Earth, which really helped to get that perspective, and you could actually see some of the existing parts of El Camino Real on Google Earth. But we quickly realized that we couldn't get everywhere we wanted to. So we had to kind of skirt around to get to some of the more visible places that we wanted to visit. There was, now there's private property, there's fences and gates, there's national parks, there's biospheres, so we couldn't get to many of the parts anyway on the motorcycles. But that sent us, on pavement, dirt roads, single track that sent us into some places that were pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
Pretty gnarly. We were heading out to this one town, La Purísima, and you look on the map, it looks like a really good road. So we're heading out there. We'd never been on this road before. And we get about 4 or 5 miles in, and the road dips down through this arroyo. And here are these 2 guys on big BMW bikes coming up real slowly towards us. So we stop, and the first guy's he's just grimacing like crazy, and just he kind of gives us that like, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa. And then the second guy comes and he stops and he says, "Yeah, be careful that spot up ahead there. It's really gnarly." This guy who's probably 10 years my senior had biffed it in the rocks and
gone down,
broken a couple of ribs, and he was in so much pain just trying to get out.
Yeah, that'll spoil a motorcycle.
I know. I looked at JT. I said, "Well, shall we go?" And it was a whole arroyo of probably maybe 50, 75 yards of bowling ball sized rocks. We were just crawling over. It was tough, but we survived.
So you, at various points in the trip, you were with different numbers of people, but mostly with JT. Did you guys stick close to each other? I think you lost each other at some point.
Yeah. We tried to stick close to each other. We had a rule from the beginning that if we got separated, to stop. If there was a Y in the road, or we weren't quite sure exactly where we were going, and you couldn't see each other, then stop, and we'll correct. We'll come back together. And we were heading on this road about 20 or 30 miles to get to the next town, and quickly, and what happens a lot in Baja is the locals are tired of riding on the main road because it gets so washboarded. So they'll peel off and they'll make their own road over here. And so then pretty soon you've got 3 or 4 roads that are kind of paralleling. And you don't know, because you can't quite see them, you don't know if that road goes somewhere else or if it's going to come back. Yeah. And so we were going through kind of a particular sandy spot, and for some reason JT was ahead of me, and usually I would ride ahead because I was the navigator and he would just kind of follow me. But he happened to be ahead of me, and I got into a sandy spot and dumped my bike. And so I quickly get it up and just to look up ahead, and just nothing but a cloud dust. Oh, great. So I take off after him, and then pretty soon the road splits, and it splits again, and I'm trying to figure out where did he go? We did have communication on our helmets, so that worked out usually pretty well if we were in close proximity.
Yeah.
He was too far ahead of me, so I couldn't get a hold of him. So I stopped and I looked, and I had to do my best tracking skills and find out, where's his tire tracks. Mm-hmm. There were several other motorcycles that had been there recently, but our tire tracks were the same, and they were quite unique. So I was able to actually figure out that he took this road, and about, I don't know, half an hour later, I pull up, and he was sitting there waiting for me. Yeah. So I wasn't too worried, but it gets you a little nervous there because we're not quite sure exactly where we're going sometimes. Because of our our micro budget, we couldn't afford new and updated GPS. So what I did in trying to plan our navigation route was I used Google Earth pinpoints, grabbed a hold of the GPS coordinates, and then transferred it from one coordinate style to another, and then put it down on a map. And we quickly found out that in that transfer, we were about between a half a mile to a mile off every time.
That's huge.
It was. It was. So that caused us to get lost quite a few times. We would wander off into the desert, and when you can't find your exact crossroads where you need to turn right, that's kind of tough. So we ended up having to go old school, map and a compass.
So the Boy Scout skills came out.
The Boy Scout skills came out big time. Exactly. And that was kind of the reason why, I was put to the task as being the navigator. JT could have done it, but that would have put something else on his plate. And I needed him to focus on the filming aspect. So he's looking at, the cactus and the road and the trees and, everything else around him and looking for the film shots.
Yeah.
And that was key, I think, for both of us.
Okay. So you had a mention of Nathan's ranch.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, you just can't plan for this stuff. And so we were camped at the top of the Sierra San Pedro Martir mountain. It's the tallest mountain in Baja, 11,000 foot elevation, in the snow. And we froze our patootie off that night and woke up the next morning, and lo and behold, there were these 3 Mexican biologists that were camped near us. So we got to talking, and one of the guys was from this little town of Catavina, right in the middle of the desert, right in the middle of the peninsula. And so all 3 of these guys gave us a great interview, and at the end, Nathan said, "Hey, in 2 days we're gonna meet with some other friends, and we're gonna go out to my ranch. Why don't you join us?" Comes to find out, his family's got an 8,000-acre ranch just outside of Catavina. It's just
Small vacation place.
Small piece of land, yeah. And so, but we had planned a different route. And so the way our initial planning was, we wouldn't be able to make that. So we said, let's go for it. So we moved some things around. We met him there at Catavina, and we're waiting around, and some other people are coming, and then this young gal comes up and she says, "Hey, I'm going to go out to the ranch with you. Can I ride on the back of JT's motorcycle?" I'm going, oh, man.
How safe do you feel?
Yeah, I go, I don't think that would be smart, because you need a helmet. She kind of, lowers her head and walks away. Lo and behold, 15 minutes later, she comes back with a helmet. And so somewhere Nathan or one of his family members had a motorcycle helmet. She goes, "Now can I go?" So I look at JT, and JT says, "Yeah, sure, I'll take her." So the ride was supposed to be just 20 minutes out. Okay, so we get on the highway, and we're following 2 pickups. Probably 20 miles down the road. I'm going, okay, where's this ranch? Where's this ranch? He peels off on this dirt road. Okay, so we're following them on this dirt road, and the road gets sandier and sandier and sandier. I'm dumping my bike right and left. JT finally, after a while, halfway down there, he dumps his bike with the gal on the back. Fortunately, they both were okay, and JT made the right call to put her in the back of the bed of the pickup truck ahead of us. So we finally made it there in the dark, and it's just this beautiful, beautiful ranch. This gorgeous oasis with that's 3 rivers converge, swimming pool, swimming pond. He showed us all around the whole ranch. There was an area where the indigenous Indians, the Cochimis, had built these rock circles, and what they believe is that that was where these tribes would come on a regular basis for these, festivals or
Sure.
something like that. And there was petroglyphs all around the place, and it was just a beautiful visit. So, had we not altered our plans and taken this young man up on his offer, then we would have missed all of that.
Yes.
So we learned.
We
learned.
Take the diversion when you can.
Exactly. Yeah, we learned. Somebody says, "Hey, do you want to do this?" Let's go for it.
Great story. So, Nelson and Goldman were obviously very influential when they were exploring and documenting the place. So there's some things named after them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, both of them lived and had amazing careers. Nelson has over 100 plants and animals and geographical features named after them. Goldman's numbers are upwards of above 50. One of the things that drew us to doing this project was finding out that there was a peak named after my great-granduncle. So there's Goldman Peak in Baja, California. After they did this trip, Nelson said, I'm gonna do this for my colleague, and so he named a peak. But it took it took a long time of figuring out where this peak was. Nelson drew and published a map of Baja, the peninsula, plus their route, and he put the peak at about 5,000 foot elevation just north of the 28th parallel. And just north of the Santa Gertrudis mission. So we kind of had a place to start. Well, he actually put the mission on the wrong side of the 28th parallel. So it kind of threw us off a little bit. But we figured out that the name is, the peak is no longer named Goldman Peak on any of the current maps.
No big sign stuck in it.
No big sign stuck in it. So we figured out that the actual peak is Cerro Quintero Rosa. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to go climb the peak. So when we were at the mission, we took off and went to go climb the peak.
Made it to the top?
Well, you'll have to see the film.
Okay.
You'll have to see the film. And then not only does Goldman have a peak named after him, but there's several plants and animals also named after Nelson and Goldman. So they were, after doing the first comprehensive study of the flora and fauna, they were finding new to science forms of life. So both Nelson and Goldman have an agave plant named after them. Goldman's agave and Nelson's.
We have a picture of that somewhere.
Yeah. So this is me standing on the right there. Me standing there next to Goldman agave, and then that's a picture of Goldman's agave that they took in 1905. And it's interesting, this story here, where on our preliminary expedition, it was me, JT, and Greg, and we're driving 50 miles an hour through the desert. And I look over, and Greg is frantically looking through his resource books. He's got a book on the plants, a book on the animals. I'm like, what is he doing? He's looking out the window, and he continues to look. And pretty soon he goes, "Okay, pull over." I go, What? So we pull over, and he goes, "That's a Goldman's agave right there." Like, 50 miles an hour, this guy is able to pick out that one flowering cactus is Goldman's agave. So, and then this one here is Nelson's century plant. So this is a glass plate negative that they took in 1905. That's housed in the Smithsonian Archives. So yeah, one of the great things about the work that they did was they captured what 1905 was like, what Baja was like in 1905. They captured it so well. So we were able to look at all of their photographs, and in many instances, go back to the exact same place and recreate the photos. We found that extremely fascinating. This is another photograph here this is the town of San Ignacio. So on the left is San Ignacio in 1905, and then on the right is today. So we were able to climb to the top of the mesa. We couldn't get the exact perspective.
No.
Because there were trees, there were some buildings in the way, but we were able to slightly get off to the side a little bit and at least capture the essence of it.
Yeah, it's got to be fascinating to see things side by side, how they are today versus back then.
Yes, it really is. Yeah,
Some haven't changed all that much, probably.
No, you're exactly right. Yeah, I mean there were places when we were just blowing through the desert out on a dirt road somewhere, and we'd stop and we'd look back through Nelson and Goldman's photos, and just it doesn't change. It had not. You know, we could have been standing there in 1905. Pretty incredible.
Speaking of plants, I have to have you talk about the creeping devil cactus.
Oh yeah.
Do we have a picture of that?
Yeah, there we go.
Yes,
That's
there we
exactly.
go.
So one of the more unique plants that they had, they didn't discover it, but they found it growing very well is the creeping devil's cactus, and it's the only plant that actually moves. It grows prostrate on the ground. It sends down these little rootlets down into the ground. In the back, it dies off, and in the front, it continues to grow. So it's actually just will move, and it'll move, you know, upwards around a meter a year.
Wow. So it keeps putting new roots down as it
Keeps putting new roots down. The front of the cactus continues to grow, and then in the rear portion, it dies off.
So here's a cactus that can actually come after you.
Yeah, if you're really
If you're slow moving.
Yeah, if you're really slow. Yeah, they were. It was. I found it extremely fascinating going through their records of what they saw, what they found. When they were in this region down there on the Magdalena Plain, amongst these cactus, they kept seeing these burrows, pretty large burrows, and you know, for several days going through the desert, they couldn't figure out what was creating these burrows. So they camped and set out some traps. And the next day, they came up with a fox. And so they were able to secure a specimen or two of the fox. And then later on, they had noticed that they would see these fox off in the desert, and they were extremely fast. And if they felt that they were at any point in danger, then they would kind of creep down, get really low to the ground, try to hide behind anything. And Nelson had asked some of the local cowboys there, because they watched that the cowboys would go lasso the coyotes just for sport.
Oh, for
what else do you do when you're?
That's a talent.
Yeah, what else do you do when you're in the desert? And he said, hey, have you ever tried to lasso the foxes? They said, oh no, that's like trying to capture the wind. So yeah, it's interesting. So you can bring up this photo here that you got. And this is the El Camino Real, part of it that they were walking on. You can barely see that it's actually a trail. So this is barely 2 or 3 feet wide. They would travel from waterhole to waterhole, and it was, you know, they were actually amazed that they were able to make it the entire length without running out of water. I mean, there were times when they had to go with a dry camp every once in a while, where them and the horses wouldn't drink anything for you know, up to 36 hours. But every time they got to a water hole that they knew about or was planned, there was water there. Because if you miss one of those water holes, you're dead.
You'd be in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on any trip like this, there are, and I've found this in Mexico generally, that you run across interesting people. You scheduled meetups with certain people. You met people along the way. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those experiences?
Yeah, where do we begin? So many. So yeah, we tried to plan ahead as much as we could with definite interviews. And being there a year before, we kind of knew that we were gonna be there in the next year during these 2 months, but we couldn't really give anybody any concrete information, and we've quickly found that our cell phones don't work. Most of the people that we wanted to interview didn't have phones, so you know, it was it was kind of a challenge even just getting to set something up. You know, kind of, well, we'll see you hopefully in the first 2 weeks of March, kind of thing. But we had some good friends that we'd been visiting down there for many years. One of our friends was Pancho, lived on a beach all by himself, 45 miles from the nearest town. And so we sought out him for an interview, which was fantastic. When we were in Bahia de Los Angeles, we were fortunate to meet up with Graham McIntosh, the famous author. He was a guy that hiked all the way around the perimeter of Baja, California, and then he took off with a burro and did similar things. So he's very entrenched in the Baja community. So he gave us a great interview. We met up with some professors and doctors and got some great interviews with them. Let me see, what else? Who else? Yeah, I know you've got a
Dick Daggett.
Oh yeah, right. Thank you very much. Yeah, gosh.
That name I remember.
Right. Yeah. So in and around Bahia de Los Angeles, there's this character in the 1880s. His name was Dick Daggett, and he was a merchant marine, and he jumped ship, and the locals hid him in a cave, and you know, the captain of the ship spent a couple of weeks trying to find him. Actually hired the local guy that hid Dick Daggett in the cave to help him find him. Oh. So anyway, so he became quite a legend in the area. And when Nelson and Goldman were going through the town of San Quintin, they met Dick Daggett. He was there for some reason, I don't know. And he said, Mr. Daggett said, hey, when you come through this area, I'll sell you some supplies. So in that area where he was probably the most treacherous part of the entire trip for Nelson and Goldman. Extremely hot, very remote. Most of the water sources in the area were charged with soda or minerals, so neither them or the horses could drink it. It was extremely hot during that time too. So when they finally got to Dick Daggett's camp, they found that it was deserted. They were gone. Oh. The cabins were locked. No sign of anybody had been there for a week or two. So they're forced with, okay, so we either go another 120, 150 miles back where we came from to get supplies, or we try to find them. And so I think they said they were down to half a pound of bacon, no more jerk meat, no more flour. That was the rest of their supplies. So they were in dire need of some supplies. And this is where these two gentlemen shine in my book. So they were able to put their tracking skills to work, and they searched around and figured out which of the 5 or 6 trails that led away from the camp where these guys went, and they followed it 15 miles down the arroyo to the sea of Cortez, and found them camped right there on the beach. They had run out of their supplies. Their supply ship had not come in, and they were living on sea turtle meat and wild honey, and they dug a shallow well and drinking brackish water. Wow. That was how they were surviving. So fortunately, the night before Nelson and Goldman got there, their supply ship had come in. So they were able to buy some supplies from them.
Stroke of luck.
Stroke of luck. And so, honestly, Dick Daggett saved their lives, really, is what it was. And so when we pulled into Bahia de Los Angeles, we were fortunate to meet and get an interview with Dick Daggett's great-grandson and Dick Daggett's granddaughter. And so we had just a wonderful experience interviewing those two folks. So they were glad to hear that we had a common connection. So.
Also remember Oscar the cowboy.
Yeah, yeah. There's one of the pictures there of some of my crew on horseback. I don't know if you can find that and bring that up, but so we one of our challenges. That's the photo right there. Yeah, one of our challenges was Nelson and Goldman down at the tip of Baja went through the La Laguna Mountains and the Sierra La Laguna, and that's an area that is closed off to motorized vehicles. So we couldn't ride our motorcycles through there. It's extremely rugged. So we had planned a horseback trip, and we wanted to send. That's my wife, my daughter, and my stepdaughter. We wanted to send them up into the mountains with a guide and give them a bunch of cameras and send them up there for a couple of days and camp out and do that. But of course, our budget didn't allow it. No. But we did set aside some money to get them for a day's trip up into the mountains, and it was just it was incredible to meet this gentleman here, and he showed up with the exact same outfit of gear, from the chaps to the helmet to the coat. That and do I have that picture of the horses side by side? No, I don't think I've got it. It's in the film.
Okay.
Okay, it's in the film. So
right.
You're gonna have to see the film for it. But
and we'll give you that information.
Oh, there you go.
Towards the end of this, be sure to go watch it. It's I've seen it. It's a great film.
Yeah. So brilliant. It's anyway. But this guy, he took the ladies up through the same arroyo that Nelson Goldman went through 110 years prior, and to read their account of what they were seeing, the trees, the cactus, and the arroyo, and then to actually be there on horseback was just absolutely spectacular. So this guy Oscar, he could have been the same guy that led Nelson Goldman, because he was just cut from the same cloth.
Changed.
Hadn't changed. No. Yeah.
So burning agave plants.
So one of the challenges that Nelson Goldman found being out in the desert was they would come into a camp area and it would be dark or close to dark, but they still needed to set up camp, or they were needing to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get someplace before the heat was too intense, which they did quite regularly. They would break camp at 2 in the morning and run. And here's kind of a picture of what one of their camps would look like, So yeah, when it's 110 degrees outside, you gotta provide some shade.
Yeah. Very Spartan but functional.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they would show up at camp or just before they were getting ready to leave, and they figured out that they could light off a couple of dead agave plants, and it would burst up into flame, and they would get at least a half an hour of decent light. Ah. So JT and I decided, let's give this a try. So we pulled into a beautiful camp spot just before dark and set up the cameras, and I went running around and lighting off all of these dead agave plants and torching them off. And from a firefighter standpoint, anytime I can light something on fire, it's a good day.
Yes. There was something else I wanted to ask you about. I know what it was. So you're in very remote areas a lot of the time. How was your experience with? A lot of remote areas of Mexico are not a good place to be out alone or in small groups. So what was your experience, if any? I would think maybe you'd be getting stopped and questioned about why are you here and what are you doing? And
yes, Yeah. Yeah. So, fortunately, we'd been down to Baja enough and through the entire peninsula, so we kind of knew some of the areas you want to stay away from. And other areas that are, free of any harassment or crime or any of that. Certainly, Mexico has got its issue with drug cartels. It's got its issue with people that are just out to do anything or take anything from you. Very much like most of our U.S. cities too. So,
Sure.
You're going through a city, you got to kind of be aware of your surroundings. You got to, park in a place that's not out in the open, or at least saying, "Hey, look at me," So you got to do that. The one thing you got to worry about though is some of the customs with the local police. We were driving through on our preliminary expedition through the town of La Paz, and in kind of a congested area, and we're trying to get to this office building where we were going to do an interview, and make a turn off on this road, and this police officer steps out in the middle of the road and flags us down. Okay, I've been through this, done this, okay. But he proceeds to tell me he's going to give me a ticket because my passenger, Greg, didn't have a seatbelt on. And then he says, "Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm going to give him a ticket too. And so let me see your driver's license." So I give my driver's license, and he goes back to his partner who's standing on the side of the road, and you can see that they're talking on the radio. We're going, "Oh, great." So he comes back to me and he says, "Okay, why don't you follow us down to the police station so I can give you a ticket?" I go, No. So Greg he very eloquently had kind of talked him down to, let me just pay the fine right now.
Yeah.
So 250 pesos later, we're driving away, and after the police officer takes his ticket book and he kind of slightly opens it up like that, and Greg slides the 250 pesos in there and says, "Get on your way." Yet there's dozens and dozens of cars driving by with, nobody's wearing seatbelts, kids in the back of the
Standing
pickup
in the
truck standing up, and so it's a different system down there. You got to learn. That's how it is, and it's unfortunate. The other issue that JT and I actually had planned for was military stops, because the military checkpoints were pretty frequent down through there. They want to make sure that nobody is carrying guns or drugs or ammunition. That's it. If you're not carrying guns or drugs or ammunition, you're fine, not a big deal. But I have been stopped in the past and been thoroughly searched in the past, and just to say, "Okay, go ahead, thank you very much." And we always found that if you're polite and cordial to them, they will be polite and cordial to you. But I told JT, I said, "Hey, every time we come up to a military checkpoint, so we had helmet cameras.
Yes.
So we would turn on the helmet camera or any other camera that we had going on our just to get."
So they know where to find the bodies later.
whatever, and I had kind of thought that, if we ever get into trouble, keep the camera rolling, keep the helmet on your head if you have to, or take off the helmet, but point the camera towards whatever's going on. And we didn't, all of the checkpoints, we only got stopped once. All the rest of them, they just would wave us through. But I had the monopod in a cloth case strapped onto the back of my motorcycle. And one of the guys stopped me once and said, "Is this a gun?" No, it's not a gun. I had to zip it open and show him exactly what it was. Hey, it looked like it could have been. They at least have a sense of humor,
Yes.
which is good.
So I had one more question, then I was thinking maybe we could see if we have any questions from audience. Motorcycle gang.
Yeah. JT and I rode into the town of Puerto San Carlos, which is on the Pacific side. And we typically, when we come into a town and we're going to stay there for a little while and look for something to film, is we would do a big circle and drive through and kind of get a good lay of the land first before we would make a decision and land and sit someplace. Mm-hmm. And so we drove around, and there was one restaurant that was open, and it had, I don't know, about a dozen motorcycles parked out in front. And so we'd passed it the first time, and we went around, and we finally said, well, let's just go back to that restaurant and let's sit down, let's have a beer, something to eat, and figure out what filming we want to do. So we pull in there, and I'm thinking, okay, this would be kind of cool. We'll park right next, our bikes right next to their bikes. And we go sit down, and there's this group of these big, just beefy, mean-looking guys, all wearing leathers, and they didn't want to have anything to do with us. They wouldn't look at us, they wouldn't talk to us. I kept trying to, kind of casually signal to them, hey, nice motorcycles kind of thing. Yeah. It was just a ragtag of everything you could imagine, from Harleys to dirt bikes with these guys. And so after about an hour, they get up to leave, and one of the guys walks over and says something to us, and that just, they just went, oh, super cool. Because
oh, really?
Like, hey, well, you guys are making a film? So they invited us back out to talk to us more about their motorcycles, and we gave them stickers, and the head guy, we gave him a bandana and everything, and next thing we knew, we were their best friends. It was almost like it was out of a movie, It was
funny.
Yeah. So, anyway.
All right. So, Andy, do we have some questions in the queue?
We sure do. Thanks.
Let's see if we can stump Todd here.
Oh, yeah. Give me a break, huh?
Yeah, thank you so much, chat, for everyone tuning in. Couple good questions in the chat tonight. First question comes from Sinclair. What GPS were you using that would cause it to go off every time you transferred?
So it wasn't so much the GPS. It was my calculations from the decimal system to the other system with I'm just drawing a blank now. Anyway,
Let it too long.
Yeah.
Let it long.
Well, yeah, minutes and minutes and seconds. So I calculated all of the numbers incorrectly. So I had a good GPS. It was an older model, and all it did was just kind of send, with an arrow going to my GPS point. But I had calculated all I transferred all of the data incorrectly. So that put us off by a half a mile to a mile. And thank you very much, Sinclair, for that. I really appreciate that. Just keep rubbing it in the dirt. But you got to learn to adapt. You got to learn to change. And I learned as a Boy Scout that you prepare, be prepared. And so we took this trip, and it was just over prepare. So we did have a good set of maps. We had several compasses, so we had the backup ability. We got lost a couple of times. We lost a couple hours wandering around out in the desert, but for the most part, we made it out just fine.
Thank you so much. Next question is, how did you choose what time of year to start?
Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you very much. So we wanted to be on one of the shoulder seasons because mostly for the weather. Being down in Baja during the middle of summer is brutally hot. And so we were either looking at springtime or we were looking at the fall. As things were coming around, getting close, we were probably 6 months out from our potential spring departure. I kept noticing that Baja California, especially northern Baja California, was getting a lot of rain. And then I started noticing there's a webcam at the top of Sierra San Pedro Martir. And so as the winter storms were coming through, it was getting dustings of snow. And that was really one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to film up there during the snow. As it turned out, we picked it perfectly. Snow was there when we got there in March, and northern Baja, you can throw that picture up there too. Northern Baja, California during that time was in a super bloom, so it was wildflower city. It was incredible. Here we are getting ready to take the 100-kilometer ride up to the top of Sierra San Pedro Martir. So those were some of the issues, and we wanted to make sure that we got down to the Cabo area before it got too bloody hot. And as it was, we had too many days where it was over 100, and you're in full gear, gloves, and you're sweating in your helmet. So at times it was a bit uncomfortable.
Thank you so much. Next question comes from Bernie Harris. Did you bend your forks in any of your spills?
Oh, man. No, not our forks. I did have an event trying to get out from a beach that we went to in Agua Verde, which is down near La Paz. And so it was a very steep, rutted, rocky road. We got down okay, but it was coming back up. It was tough. And so we'd set the cameras up and trying to film me crashing because I went first. And no, I hit a couple of those ruts a little hard and did some damage to the back end of my bike. But we didn't bend anything, which was really good. Thanks, Bernie.
For sure. Next question is, what was something you brought because you thought you'd need it, but didn't end up using?
Oh, man. Here's some good questions. You know what? I don't think there was much that we brought. Well, yeah, our first aid kit. We didn't need the first aid kit, with the exception of a needle and thread. And so we had to sew some of my gloves and pants that were falling apart. But for the most part, all of our gear that we meticulously chose typically had dual purposes. So because we come from a backpacking family, it was an easy transition to go from backpacking to adventure riding on motorcycles.
Sort of minimalist approach.
Exactly. So, we took that same kind of approach, and our gear was very, very similar. We did take a rain fly. We didn't take a tent, but we took a rain fly, and we didn't need that. So I guess that would be two things, Yeah. Yeah, I grew up.
Not bad.
Yeah, I know. I grew up backpacking as a kid and still do to this day, and I don't carry a tent, so just a rain fly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Next question comes from Lemoyne Fulton, and Lemoyne wants to know, when can we see the movie? And I'll add, where can we see the movie?
Thank you very much for that. When can we see it and where can we see it? Currently, we are in the film festival circuit, so we don't have a broadcast deal yet. So if anybody has a connection or knows somebody, or maybe you would like to enter into a broadcast deal with us, we'd love to get the film out there so everybody can see it. Currently, it's like I said, we're in a couple of film festivals. We're winding down with the circuit. We've been winning some awards. JT was awarded the best director in one of the film festivals, which is a huge honor. We're in film festivals across the globe, in Australia and London, and across the United States. So as soon as we finish this, then we're going to hopefully start to market it. But hey, like I said, give me a call if you want to enter into a broadcast deal. We'd love to do that.
So if they want to track you, you have a website?
We do. We have a website, thedevilsroadfilm.com. Mm-hmm. And you can go to the website. You can see our official trailer. We've also done several small vignettes over the years. They're available too. You can read all about the backstory and everything that's going on with us. If you want to continue to follow us, send us an email, and we would gladly keep you on our list. So when something happens, when there's a showing, or there's a release of some sort, then we'll let you know. The unfortunate thing, we got hit with the COVID thing, and that's really put everybody, especially us independent filmmakers, into an odd place right now, and we can't show the film like we would like to. We did have a couple of very enthusiastic and full house showings prior to the COVID that gave us some really good hope.
Well, I can say also, I was lucky to get a sneak peek at it, and astounding. It's well worth the wait. Whenever it does come out, you have to see it. It's a great story and some great videography, and a very enjoyable story.
Thank you. Thank you.
For sure. Hopefully we can have a showing at the club once it comes out.
Yeah.
And congrats on the big wins.
Well, we can certainly, once the COVID thing lifts, we can make that happen. We can make that happen.
I think we all hope it does. Next question is, what is one thing you wish you could say to your great-granduncle?
Oh, something I could say to him? Boy. I think for me, I'm just absolutely amazed at what he and his partner went through in their career. He and Nelson spent 14 years in Mexico. They were thrown in filthy jails. They were attacked. They were hunted down to be killed, thinking that they were government men. They hiked all 12 of the highest peaks in Mexico. Just the environmental issues that they had to deal with, the illnesses, malaria, bug-ridden, flea-infested, bed bugs. I'm just absolutely amazed at what they did and how they had to go about doing it. To travel, the 2,000 miles on horseback from the top to the bottom of Baja, California is an incredible feat. They would get on a sloop to go out to an island, and sometimes, on one particular time, it took them 5 days to get out there because of the calms. There wasn't any wind. They didn't have motors.
You're just stuck.
You're stuck. You just got to wait it out. So, yeah, I don't think there's any one thing, but I would love to sit down with a glass of whiskey with him and talk about some of his experiences, because they were tough men. And I don't think there's many men today that could have done what they did back then.
Yeah, we're living a pretty soft modern lifestyle, and they were living in rugged times in the best of civilization at that time.
Right, I know.
And to leave all that and go and do what they did is amazing to me.
Yeah, I know. They were just like 3 days out of Ensenada, and they had to make a return trip back to Ensenada real quick. Nelson jumped in a light wagon, and in the notes that we read, in one source, it said that he needed to get the specimens back to Ensenada to send them off on a ship. Mm-hmm. And then in another source we read that no, actually he had a rotten tooth that was bothering him so bad he had to go back to Ensenada to get it extracted. Mm-hmm. So it's a different time, that's for sure.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more questions from the chat tonight. First one comes from Air Coop Pilot. Did you stop at any small airstrips and encounter any airplane campers or any sailboat cruises anchoring out along the coast? Basically, fellow R travelers with different modes of transport.
That's, yes. So one of the things that I was remiss in talking about, because this was a big family event, I had reached out to as many family members to help out along the way. So my brother, who is a retired Navy test pilot, owns his own plane, lives in Maryland, he said, hey, I'll fly our plane down and meet you down there. So he and his wife jumped in their plane. They flew down to San Felipe and met us in San Felipe. At the same time, now, and this is, we were about 3 or 4 days away out of communication with anybody. At the same time, my other brother and my dad were driving down to meet us. And so we had 3 modes of transportation, all arriving at the San Felipe airport, all within 1 hour of time. And we had not communicated for days. Just the kind of general, we'll be there in the afternoon on this day. So yeah, so he and his wife flew down, and the next day we jumped, we put JT in the back of the plane, took the door off, strapped him in there with the camera, and then my 2 brothers took off and flew out and did, I don't know how many hours, a couple hours worth of flying over the northern part of Baja just to get an amazing perspective. And at the same time, I took off on the motorcycle and went out into the desert. It kind of here's the map. I'm going to be somewhere around right here. Yeah. So, so I go buzzing out there, and I'm waiting around. It's about an hour goes by, nothing. All of a sudden I hear him. And I'm parked in the middle of a dirt road, out in the middle of nowhere, just by myself. And I hear the plane coming, so I go to jump on the bike, and it tips over, and it falls over. I was standing still, and I dumped the bike. And so I had to struggle to get it up, and just at that time, they buzzed right over the top of me. So we were able to get some really good footage from my perspective looking at them, and then them coming down looking at us. So that was a great opportunity. Then after San Felipe, we all drove up to a place called Mike's Sky Ranch. And anybody who's done any four-wheeling or motorcycling in Baja, California has heard of Mike's Sky Ranch. We went there with one specific goal, and that was to catch a Nelson trout. Wow. So we talked earlier about some of the things that are named after these guys. When they were there, they found the only living trout species in Baja, California, in a little tiny stream up in the Sierra San Pedro Martir. So over the years, they transported some of the fish fry into this one stream at Mike's Sky Ranch. Mm-hmm. So coming from a fly fishing family, certainly we got to go.
Challenges there.
The challenge is accepted. Yeah, we got to go catch a Nelson trout. So we set off, all of us, and with fly rods in hand, and JT with his camera gear to film us catching a Nelson trout. Pretty spectacular. My other brother Eric, he claims that he has a world record. It's 8 inches. Now, nobody keeps record of the size, but yes. In his mind, it's a world record. But yeah, Nelson and Goldman had recorded catching fish to 15 inches in that stream. So all we caught was a bunch of little ones. But it was well worth it. Thank you for that question there.
Thank you for that great answer. Final question of the night comes from our president, Alex Shoemate, and he wants to know, are there any other explorers whose footsteps you'd like to follow on future trips?
Oh, Alex, thank you very much. Any other explorers? You know what? I think that I would no longer be married if I said that I'm going to go on another expedition. But, there are so many. I'm fascinated by people that have done some amazing things. Shackleton, for one. what he went through. I've continued to dive into Nelson's work in Alaska. So, when he was up in Alaska, there was a couple of whaling ships that went missing in 1880. And so in 1881, he was picked up along with John Muir to go and try to find these missing whaling ships. And he and Muir and the captain and a couple other crewmates were the first people to set foot on Wrangel Island up in the, I don't know what sea that is, up above the Bering Sea, but it's way up there. Yeah, and they almost got trapped in the ice. So it was the USS Jeanette. So that's a fascinating story. So, yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah. Sorry about that, Alex. I don't know in particular, but I'm still fascinated by the work that some of these men have done.
Okay. I'd also like to point out that I love a speaker who comes in and not only brings his own booze with him, but it's his own brand. This is the Devil's Road Tequila Reposado, aged in mesquite wood. This is really good. You'll have to take my word for it, but trust me.
Thank you. It's a little bit of a home passion of mine, so I've been enjoying doing that. I'm glad that you enjoy it.
It was very good. Todd, thank you so much for this evening.
Thank
I
you.
hope everyone found this interesting. If you guys enjoyed it, we're here every week. If you liked this particular program, be sure to share it with friends, spread it around, and tune in next week for the next episode.